The rain in Curitiba that morning was more persistent than usual, cool on the backs of the legs, teeth of wind nipping bare toes where shoes pinched in puddles. I waited backstage in the school's faded auditorium, fussing with the cheap cardboard note cards that shook ever so slightly in my hands. The principal's voice echoed off the walls, each syllable bouncing among the banners and cracked tiles. I could imagine the audience, my classmates tense in their gowns, parents wielding smartphones instead of applause, my own mother craning her neck in the fifth row, my uncle Ricardo with his arms tightly crossed, lips already twisted in anticipation. They'd chosen me to speak because despite it all I had good grades and a reputation for being, as they put it, imaginative. That was the word adults used when they didn't want to admit weird or, as my grandmother hissed, intrenuvans, literally among the clouds. I wiped a hand at the droplets that speckled my glasses, steadied my breathing, and stepped out onto the stage. The blinding lights erased their faces for a moment. I began the speech I'd practiced 100 times, a neat, respectable paragraph, a safe reflection on growing up in the same neighborhood, walking the cobbled streets down to the pastel shops, grinding exams and jumping puddles. But my throat closed at the familiar platitudes, and in that electric silence I veered from the script. Something sharper pushed out of me. My family says I dream too much, I went on, my voice suddenly too strong, too raw. They say real jobs matter, engineering, medicine, law, but I want to make films. I want to show stories from our streets, from this city, stories about us. I know it sounds impossible, but... A thin, reedy laugh shot up from somewhere near the back, my cousin Andre, never subtle. Someone coughed, I pressed forward, voice fluttering. I want to make movies that matter here. If I have to do it alone, I will. I didn't get farther. Principal Silver's hand closed on my shoulder with a warning grip, his blandly smiling face turned to the crowd. Thank you, Lucas, for your ambitious vision. Let's thank Lucas. He steered me away, applause stuttered and scattered, tainted by the whispers already circling among the seats. I could feel them watching as I disappeared behind the curtain. My family, my friends, the skeptical teachers who'd marked up every essay too full of dialogue, too little math. After the ceremony, the rain slowed, but the chill of what I'd said stuck. Out in the parking lot, while classmates snapped photos and tossed their caps, I stood stiffly beside my mother's car, dress shirt clinging to my back. She kissed my cheek with a tight, nervous anxiety, eyes skittering away. It's just nerves. The film thing, people always say things at speeches, don't worry about it, Amma. But I did worry. At home that night, plates of leftover buffet food sweating in the heat, Uncle Ricardo cleared his throat. The TV rattled in another room. The scent of coccinhas and tired flowers hung in the air. He raised a beer. To the next Spielberg of Capão Raso, eh? He jeered, eyebrows bouncing as everyone snickered. Maybe you'll film weddings, Lucas, or babies at the baptismo. A man needs a trade. My dreams, absurd in their audacity, became the family joke. My younger siblings mimicked Oscar speeches at the dinner table. My grandmother repeated that stories were nice, but papel não pô comida na mesa, stories don't put food on the table. My best friend Tiago grew polite but distant, distracted by university applications abroad. Mom alternated between worrying and gentle nudges toward accounting programs. I told myself I didn't care, but that was a lie. The hurt made me stubborn. I got a job at a kiosk in the shopping center, saving every real I could. At night, I watched YouTube tutorials, scribbled ideas on bus tickets, borrowed a friend's battered camera. Sundays, I'd slink away from chores and roam the narrow alleys of Pilarzinho, watching life spill out in front of me. Kids playing football under ruptured streetlights, the steam from Mantecardo carts, loud debates over chess boards in plastic chairs. I filmed what I could, fragmented, blurry, full of life. One night at a family dinner, I showed them a stitched-together short film on an old laptop. My sister yawned, my father watched without expression. Ricardo grunted, cute. Try Globo, see what they pay you. By the time dessert was served, they'd mostly forgotten I'd even tried. I felt the ache of that night for years. After national service, I scraped together enough to enroll in a media course at a small local college. There were others like me, rebellious, bright-eyed, broke. We rented dingy setups, bartered favors, pooled gear. Still, the city felt stacked against us, producers in Sao Paulo and Rio, festivals casting their eyes elsewhere. I worked shifts at cafes while shooting weddings and birthdays, just as Uncle Ricardo predicted, until, finally, I managed a grant from the city's Pale Cultural Fund. It was enough for 10 nights of filming. We made a film that winter, so nasquem luta, about a single-mother Uber driver haunted by past choices, shot in the damp, milky light of dawn. I edited the film myself in the single room I rented above a bakery, the smell of fermenting dough drifting through the cracks at all hours, mixing with the clatter of Copa Libertadores from the bar below. I sent the film everywhere, festivals, competitions, online forums, most never wrote back, but somehow, and still I don't quite understand the grace of it, a programmer from Rotterdam replied, they wanted to screen it. I barely managed a cheap passport and plane ticket, credit card debt ballooning while family rolled their eyes. Europe, a travel excuse, Ricardo said, lounging in his wrinkled Curitiba jersey. But the festival night happened, and I stood trembling in a new suit in a foreign lobby, fidgeting with the festival badge on my chest. When the audience clapped, half in understanding, half in polite European reserve, I realized my story, born in the foggy streets of Curitiba, could survive in translation. A small distributor offered a limited release. Someone offered me a job assisting on a documentary. Suddenly, doors I'd never dared knock on were left gently ajar. I grabbed them with both hands. For years, I didn't come home. I skirted birthdays and holidays, sending cash and postcards across the Atlantic, framing success so that my family could believe from a safe distance. I worked on features, documentaries, music videos. The money stayed thin, but the work grew richer. I took pride in what I made, no matter how meandering the path became. Still, I carried the sting of that auditorium laughter, of smirks at the dinner table, of Ricardo's voice echoing in my skull. Over time, the film built a small cult following. It won a few regional awards, appeared on streaming in South America. I began finally to taste a kind of success that was less about money, more about recognition. My name found its way into articles, was pronounced, often wrongly, on radio and podcasts. Only then did my family start to call. My sister sent a blurry photo of a magazine clipping featuring my name. Mom left a voicemail choked with pride and confusion, asking if I'd come back to visit. When it's safe, Querido, people ask about you at the bakery. So I returned 6.5 years after that abbreviated speech, landing at the familiar, rain-lashed airport, suitcase bruised and heavy on the belt. Mom waited near the arrivals, face lined with new worries, eyes soft. She held out her arms and I collapsed into the embrace. We rode silently through the city, its neon haze slicked with rain, the city somehow smaller but unchanged. She glazed over my work, special things, very complicated, I brag but don't know what it is, but insisted I visit the family Sunday, saying, Ricardo is coming, he's proud, you know, sort of. He says so. That Sunday lunch at my grandmother's house was both familiar and charged, as if the air itself held a trick. The hallway was lined with the usual shoes, wet jackets draped over door handles. In the kitchen, the smells of beef stew, fried garlic, and sweet cakes tangled with shouts in accented Portuguese and television chatter. My siblings fussed over my hair, my cousin Andre faked a bow, oh dieter, and Ricardo, holding his beer, leveled a hard, appraising look at me. Back from Hollywood, eh, Spielberg? Not quite, I said, breathing past the tight squeeze in my chest. I thought we could watch something if you want. Some of my aunts groaned, not another wedding video, Lucas, but Mom shushed them gently. I had brought a copy of the film, subtitled now worn and creased from festivals. I set the laptop on the plastic dining table, surrounded by the remnants of feijoada and scattered napkins, as rain thudded hard against the glass. At first, only the littler cousins crowded around. The grown-ups slumped in chairs, chatting behind hands, waiting for a punchline. But as the story began, Mercedes's breath rough in the pre-dawn, taxi meter clicking, her son's shoes squeaking on tile, the room stilled. The scenes crackled with the damp rhythm of Curitiba, the white murk of bus headlights, the bitter tang of exhausted hope. My uncle Ricardo stopped picking at his plate. My grandmother leaned closer, her mouth dropped open, not in criticism but in recognition. She knew these streets, this tone, this lack. My sister started translating lines for Grandma in a soft, uncertain voice, but it soon became unnecessary. The emotions in the film overwhelmed language. Mom's hand found mine under the table, squeezing tight. When the closing credits rolled, the silence was heavy, then filled with murmurs. That's the corner by the butcher, isn't it? That's Kiko's bakery in the morning. I saw myself, I swear. My voice caught when my name appeared as director. Ricardo cleared his throat. His eyes were red, barely masked by the beer in his other hand. Did they really show this in Europe? Yes, I said quietly, afraid my voice would break, yet holding to a fragment of who I was again in that moment. He nodded, looking at me as if for the first time in years. I didn't know you could make it ours, I didn't think it could matter. Shit, he paused, running a rough hand across his chin. You proved me wrong. It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it hung in the air, honest and raw. That week, the film was featured in the small community center cinema a few blocks from their house. The posters pinned to telephone poles bore my name, the stills of our city. On the opening night, Mom wore her nicest dress, Grandma hobbled in holding my elbow. Ricardo invited his drinking buddies. Tiago showed up, taller and tired from months abroad, grinning, pride in his eyes. We watched as our city came to life on the big screen, rain streaking windows, stray dogs sleeping on doorsteps, women buying bread with a string of coins, voices arguing, laughing, forgiving. When the lights rose, the audience didn't scatter immediately. Strangers pressed my hand, friends from childhood hugged me fiercely, some cried, some simply nodded. The hull of skepticism cracked open, and in its place, acceptance, or something I'd wanted my whole life. After, as we spilled into the cool Curitiba night, Ricardo clapped my back, rough but real. You showed us we're worth seeing. That's not ridiculous, nephew. Grandma shuffled by my side, frail but proud, whispering old stories, remnants of another city and another time. My mother, eyes sparkling with tears, looked at me and said effortlessly, "You found the truth, you brought it home." The gossip changed, the skepticism softened. My film became a point of pride, a local boy's impossible dream made real. Older relatives still prodded at my future, reminded me of stability, but it no longer bore the sting of ridicule. I had come back, not to prove them wrong, not entirely, but to share the thing I'd made out of stubborn longing and bruised hope. It wasn't about fame or even forgiveness. It was about planting something fragile in the soil of home and seeing it take root against everything. That night, as the last guests drifted home through rain-slicked streets, I lingered by the window, watching the city that had doubted me, shaped me, finally watched me in return. In the soft, persistent drizzle of Curitiba, I felt, for the first time, whole.